Hello, everybody, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Ryan, and welcome to Central Park. Seems like it's been forever since I've been the host of a weekly walk, but I'm happy to be back bringing you another one of our weekly walk series that occur every Wednesday at 12:30. This weekly walk being titled Remembering the Maine with me, Ryan, on today, February 15th, 2023. As always, the photos you're going to see were taken here in Central Park over the past week or so, and we're going to have a fun little wintertime walk, even though today it feels like a spring day out here in Central Park. And we're going to learn a little bit about the Maine Monument. Now, you may be wondering why we're going to be celebrating or remembering the Maine today. And that's because on this date, February 15th, 1898, the USS Maine battleship would actually explode just off the coast of Havana in Cuba. We do see this eventually leading to the Spanish-American War, and about 15 years later, the unveiling of this Maine monument located down near Merchants Gate in Central Park. So let's go talk a little bit about how this monument came to be. So as we make our way through the park, I want to thank you for helping to support and keep Central Park clean and green. Our mission at the Central Park Conservancy is, of course, to celebrate Central Park as a sanctuary from the pace and pressures of city life, enhancing the to preserve and celebrate Central Park as a sanctuary from the pace and pressures of city life, enhancing the enjoyment and well-being of all. I want to thank you for continuing to support us here at the Central Park Conservancy and join us on these weekly walks. Now, I will encourage anybody to say hello in the chat and maybe share some favorite moments they've had in the park, as well as ask questions using the Q&A feature. Last but not least, you will see some polls that'll launch throughout the tour today. Once you voted in those, I can share the results. And hopefully it should work. Sorry for the moment there as I was establishing the captions, which I hope are working now. The captions should also be popping up. If you do not want to see the captions, you can go to that CC icon or live transcript icon on the bottom, and you can turn those captions off. There we go. Okay, so they should be set now and should have the captions available if you'd like. But as we explore through the park today, we're going to start up around about 79th Street and Central Park West, and we're going to make our way down to Columbus Circle, where we can find the Maine Monument today. We have a nice little walk ahead of us, and we are going to stop by a few other types of memorials along the way. So let's begin our walk just over around about 79th Street and Central Park West as we enter, 77th Street and Central Park West, as we start to enter the park on this west side on a pretty warm winter day. As we start to make our way down into the park, and notice there's not too many leaves left on many of the trees, but there's still some beautiful sights to see around. And a little bit further into the park, we can see some of the evergreen shrubs that keep the park green during this otherwise pretty gray season. But we do have some warm weather to enjoy. And as we make our way a little bit further, some beautiful architecture to complement this area. What we see here is an area we may be familiar with. It's known as Hearn's Head. That name coming from the rock, which from an aerial view looks like a heron's head. But what we can see specifically in this photo is a beautiful complemented piece of architecture, Ladies Pavilion. Now, some of you may know from past walks, this was made by an architect who helped design Central Park, Jacob Ray Mould, around 1871. We also see this trolley stand, as it was, originally being located where the Maine Monument is today. We'd actually see it being relocated up here around 1913, after the Maine Monument would be dedicated down near Columbus Circle. It complements the park beautifully today in this little location that overlooks the lake, and of course, Hearn's Head just behind it. But looking at old photographs, we can see this trolley stand just on the far right middle side of this photo. Existing down where today's Maine Monument stands. We can also see how really expansive Columbus Circle has been as those trolley cars have decreased or been taken away altogether. And we do see the Columbus Circle Center actually being expanded. And of course, a lot of vehicular traffic replacing these horse-drawn carriages and trolleys. But beautiful older photos we can see here, like this one, which comes from the Museum of the City of New York. As we look today back at Ladies Pavilion, we can enjoy the subtle, beautiful decoration that again comes from Jacob Ray Mould, one of the architects that helped to work at Central Park. You can also see in the background one of the separate boat landings that surrounds the lake today. As we make our way a little bit out onto Hearn's Head, we can enjoy this rock just a little bit. This again getting its name from its aerial view, which is said to look like a heron's head. But whether you see a heron's head or not, you certainly can enjoy this view over at the lake, which just a couple days ago was starting to freeze over, but with the warmer weather we're having, it's starting to thaw out a lot. And of course, today it feels like about 60 degrees out in the park. So if you do have the opportunity, highly encourage walking around and enjoying some of the views. But as we make our way around, we can see there's not too many people in the park, even though it's pretty warm out there. As we start to make our way a little bit more south, we can head to some other types of sites that serve as memorials here in Central Park. But as we make our way back out along the West Side Drive, we can stop and take note of the fun little shorelines of this area. You can also see some visitors here, like a few Canada geese that are diving for a little snack. Unfortunately, there is something else we can often see around the shores of water bodies, and that is going to be trash. A lot of pollution and a lot of different plastics can unfortunately be found along a lot of water bodies. In fact, most trash and pollution and litter eventually ends up in a water body. And trash and really any type of material, even organic material, takes about 2 or 3 times as long to decompose in water compared to on land and terrestrial areas. Looking closer, though, we can see a lot of various types of litter, from bottle caps to wrappers, and even some types of styrofoam and microplastics. Microplastics you may have heard of before. These are plastic fragments, typically that are less than 5 millimeters in size. Microplastics, because of them being so small, can very easily be ingested and even inhaled by both wildlife and ourselves. Nobody really knows for sure exactly the effects microplastics have when they're ingested and inhaled, but they can cause immune and inflammatory reactions. They can damage cells and possibly a lot worse. We do not really know that much just yet, but it is believed that humans ingest and inhale microplastics on a daily basis. So something we should really be concerned about. And of course, it also takes away from the views of the park and hurts wildlife that are going to be ingesting this. As we make our way a little bit down, we can enjoy a nice little walkway along the park and enjoy some of the wildlife, like this pigeon, which is also taking time to stroll along the park rather than fly. And as we notice some of the shoreline areas, we can notice something else, some pruned areas of various plants and shrubs. Pruning is something that is pretty important to occur, especially during wintertime, as it can cut back some of these faster and quicker growing plants and give more opportunity to sunlight and nutrients to reach some of the lower lying and slower to emerge spring plants. So you will see a lot of pruning occurring during this time. Something else you might see that we'll talk about in a little while. But as we make our way by some of these freshly pruned plants, we can take a quick moment to cross the street and head a little west, stopping by a landscape that we're pretty familiar with. But we'll take a little bit more of a unique way to get there. We'll hang over to the left in this photo, and we'll walk onto this grassy area that seems like it just maybe leads to a dog walk, but rather leads to a path that takes us up a small hill. As we start to make our way up this hill, we can find ourselves doing a little bit of mountain climbing. That little bit of climbing is going to be worth it, because as we do make our way to the top of this, we can get a nice view overlooking Hearn's Head, where we walked from before. That, again, area that looks like a heron's head from afar, or from an aerial view. But from up here, we can just enjoy the subtle little curves of the park on this rather empty day. As we make our way further in, we can maybe start to realize that we are coming into Strawberry Fields, a landscape that helps to memorialize John Lennon, member of the Beatles and a musician who had a wonderful solo career. You might know that Strawberry Fields helps to commemorate John, who fortunately was killed in 1980. This landscape is a living garden of peace, featuring various plants like this large American holly we can see here, which were donated by various different nations. This American holly is actually going to be the gift of the United States to Strawberry Fields, standing prominently close by that Imagine mosaic. But these nice evergreen leaves hold through the winter time, providing a beautiful green bouquet constantly here at Strawberry Fields. As we make our way a little bit off of the rustic path, we can head up towards that mosaic. This, along the way, passing by some of the beautiful little snowdrops we can see along the side. This is probably the most snow we're going to find in Central Park, as we're having, again, a very warm winter. The next few days projected to be reaching about 65 degrees here. As we make our way up, though, further, We can see some more white in the form of the gray and white Imagine mosaic. What's that behind me? We can see this mosaic coming from a group of artists from Naples, Italy. The design selected by Yoko Ono herself, and the group of artists from Naples traveling here to actually install it for this area's unveiling, which would be on October 9th, 1985, what would have been John Lennon's 45th birthday. Of course, like many areas in the park, we do have quite a few memorials beyond just the Maine Monument that help honor some people that lost their lives. Of course, this being one of the most visited in Central Park, Strawberry Fields. As we make our way a little bit out of here, we can check out one other memorial along the way to the Maine Monument. So we'll keep wrapping down south, but we'll take a quick moment to what seems like exit the park. But as we make our way a little bit further over, we're not going to exit. We're just going to check out a couple more different features being applied by our operations staff to help better these landscapes during what sometimes is a grueling winter, but sometimes is a little bit warmer of a winter, which poses different types of challenges. You might notice a lot of wood chips being applied during wintertime. Now, wood chips or mulching during winter will be done for a number of different reasons. One of the reasons mulching will be done is to kind of control the temperature and sort of insulate the soil. Now, that's done for a few different reasons. I know you might be thinking it's really warm out there. Why does the soil need to be insulated? Well, the soil is really helpful to insulate because when we get these warm spells, sometimes it kind of tricks plants into blooming a little bit earlier. So putting down this mulch will help to kind of keep that soil at a controlled temperature, and it will help to prevent these early warm spells from creating early growth in plants, which again can be killed after a little frost comes if the winter isn't actually over, which it isn't supposed to be just yet. So mulching like this has been done in the past few weeks, especially in anticipation of these warmer spells that we're getting. Help, of course, keep those spring plants looking healthy. And as we make our way what seems to be out of the park, we're not going to leave the park, but rather take a path that seldom gets noticed. The small little path next to the trash cans and bench that bring us right along the Strawberry Fields area, back down to the bridle path. And as we make our way down to the bridle path, we can take a moment to walk here, enjoying some of the other areas that are being mulched, like we can see in the bottom left of this photo. Now, as we make our way down the path, we can stop by one other memorial on our way to the main. And as we head up here, just over to the left, we'll walk over to a statue some of you may be familiar with, a statue that's gazing over to Sheep Meadow. The statue that we can come see here is known as the 7th Regiment Memorial Statue. It helps to honor some of the about 58 soldiers that would lose their lives fighting for the Union Army from the 7th Regiment here in New York City. We see this statue proudly taking on the really look of just a common soldier, rather than representing a general, which was common for many Civil War statues. We see this one taking on the everyday soldiers type of look. And we see him proudly looking over Sheep Meadow, a landscape that was originally created to be a parade ground in Central Park, an area used for military drill and activity. But this statue is quite a beautiful one. We can see Pro Patria et Gloria. Pretty bad at reading Latin, but that stands for unity and honor, I believe. But a very beautiful piece here with a few inscriptions mentioning some of the 58 people that gave their lives for the Union Army between 1861 and 1865 for the American Civil War. This piece was designed by an artist who has quite a few pieces found throughout Central Park, named John Quincy Adams Ward. More recently, it was actually noted that the sculpture was sculpted and carved by different gentlemen. Recent research has shown that Vincenzo Cassoni and Pietro T. Isola, two Italian sculptors, were actually in charge of bringing this piece to life. The photo that we can see here is a photo that's actually coming from Greenwood Cemetery website, where you can find some other works by Cassoni and Isola. But this photo, we're not too sure if Cassoni and Isola are actually in it or not, but it's theorized to be two of them here, along with another helper that probably helped along creating the statue. But an interesting discovery that we see here, as we for quite some time thought that this piece was created solely by John Quincy Adams Ward. We do see a beautiful piece that has stood here for quite some time, being unveiled back in the early 1870s. We see this piece helping again to honor some of the Union soldiers that lost their lives fighting the American Civil War. As we make our way a little bit further down on the bridle path, we'll head towards the Maine Memorial that we came here to see today. As we walk just a little bit further down, we can take some lesser traveled paths that wrap along the west side of the park. And again, it's pretty warm and pretty empty in the park today. Although a lot of people don't like to come to the park during winter, visiting during this time does give us a lot of really not only serene moments, but a lot of nice private opportunity to explore the park. And of course, we do occasionally run into some other people enjoying the park as well. But as we make our way just down the path a little bit, we can come to our main resistance. I know we're probably not here to see this little kiosk, but rather the statue that's peeking out from behind it. But while we're here, we can point out the Columbus Circle kiosk. It's one of our 5 visitor centers found throughout the park. This one welcoming people that are entering the park at Merchants Gate, which is one of the most visited gates in all of Central Park. And it actually historically has been for quite some time. But if you're in this area, you can get a free map, some information, maybe learn about some of our tours, as well as potentially buy a small souvenir to remember Central Park and support the park. But as we come to the end of our walk, we can come to what we really come to focus on, the Maine Monument. Now, as we just look over, we can see this beautiful piece, which would be cast around September 1st, 1912, and eventually erected and dedicated on May 30th, 1913. About 63 feet tall, and as we've learned before, it does commemorate the USS Maine, which unfortunately exploded on February 15th, 1898. Now, this is the photo of the USS Maine. Actually, while I pull this photo up, I'd like to share a little poll. This little first poll is a simple one. Have you ever boarded a naval ship? And that doesn't have to be for naval purposes, but there's plenty of museums around. Even I can think of the Intrepid, which I believe is still open. So maybe some of you have visited the Intrepid Museum while here in New York, but submarines also are included in there. Any type of really naval ship, I will accept for this, but we'll see what everybody has to say for that as we take a look over the USS Maine. You know, again, the Maine Monument commemorates the about 258 to about 266, a little speculation in the number of soldiers that lost their lives during this explosion. This USS Maine battleship was sent over towards Havana Harbor near Cuba to really keep an eye on the uprising that was occurring there, to really keep a watch over the American interests that existed there, as well as some of the American citizens and people that were living over there. We see eventually on February 15th, 1898, an explosion occurring on the USS Maine. It's still speculative about what exactly happened and what exactly caused the explosion. Some people believe it might have been a mine or a torpedo. Some people believe it might have been a type of specific gas that was used for the main ship that released fumes that regularly were caused to combust, leading to a fire breaking out. Whatever the case, we do see, unfortunately, on this day in 1898, the Maine sinking and many sailors losing their lives. It would ultimately lead to the Spanish-American War, which would occur around April 25th, 1898, and end by December 10th of 1898, as the Treaty of Paris would be signed on December 10th. We see this war, though, really sparking very quickly thanks to the case of yellow journalism through many of the newspapers in New York City, such as William Randolph Hearst's New York Morning Journal. We see various quotes coming out, things like "remember the Maine, to hell with Spain," which would lead to, again, this animosity amongst United States residents, leading to the Spanish-American War, which eventually America would win, which would cede control of Guam, Puerto Rico, the Philippine Islands, Hawaii, and Cuba from Spain's control. We eventually do see this beautiful Maine Monument being erected, though, to commemorate the sailors that lost their lives. William Randolph Hearst, He, 4 days after the sinking of the Maine, in his New York Morning Journal, called for the collection of money for a monument to be created to honor these sailors. We see the money being raised over quite a few years, with large donations being given, as well as really just small collections being collected by school children, really donating pennies at a time. We eventually, though, do see the funds being raised to create a beautiful piece that we see here today. And as we start to talk about this piece, I do just want to end and share that result. And it looks like a lot of people have their sea legs and have boarded some type of naval ship before. I think the Intrepid might be the only one I've ever been on. So maybe a few of you have more sea experience than I do. But again, plenty of opportunity to visit many of these beautiful ships, whether you see them in person or even step onto them. But as we take a look at the Maine Monument, let's dive a little bit closer into some of the beautiful artistic detail of this piece. Now, when this was being created, William Randolph Hearst, he was very involved in the whole process, as you can imagine, fundraising for it. He originally was suggesting to put this piece near New York Harbor and have it overlooking kind of the Narrows and the Atlantic Ocean, a proper fitting memorial, he thought, or direction for this piece to be in. But eventually we see that the location decided for it being Longacre Square. Longacre Square would actually be where Times Square is today, and that would be the chosen location. However, due to a clerical oversight, a comfort station would be created there, and instead we'd eventually see Columbus Circle being chosen. Columbus Circle being chosen because in 1892, the Columbus statue would be erected. So to kind of add counterbalance to these two larger pieces, why not put it here? But we do see a very beautiful work existing in this location and quite a few beautiful details that we can find after it. The sculpture would be really designed by quite a few different people. We see H. Van Buren McGonigal helping to design this, along with Attilio Picarelli. I'm probably butchering some of the pronunciations, and I do apologize to anybody that can properly pronounce them. But we do see between McGonigal and Picarelli a beautiful design coming here. Attilio Picarelli and his 5 brothers, they'd operate a studio in Mott Haven, and they would be responsible for creating many of the beautiful casted characters that we see around here. Many of these pieces coming from various forms of granite. You can actually see a lot of the figures here coming from more of a Tennessee pink granite, whereas the pylon is coming from a different type of granite. But they would carve a lot of their own works and create, of course, beautiful, beautiful sculptings. Some of the pieces we can see here, like in the front of the Maine Monument, are kind of representing a ship's bow. And what we're seeing here is an allegorical group of figures that is entitled The Antebellum State of Mind, Courage Awaiting the Flight of Peace and Fortitude Supporting the Feeble. A very long title for this piece. The youth at the prow of it help to hold their hands out. It's a sign for victory that's being represented here. And of course, a very triumphant piece here in the front. As we look at the back, we can see another very detailed and very striking piece over here. This piece at the rear has a very long name as well. The Postbellum Idea, Justice Receiving Back the Sword Entrusted to War. This piece is really amazing. It's again coming from Tennessee pink marble, while the large pylon behind it, or kind of the pedestal type piece, is made from Maine granite, a very white appearing type of granite, kind of similar to almost a limestone look to it. But a really beautiful collection that we see here. Beyond that, we can also see the oceans represented on both the east and west side. On the west side here, we do see a figure, which I believe maybe to be like a Poseidon or Neptune type character. This is actually representing the Pacific Ocean over here, the older figure. While just on the east, we can see a representation existing of the Atlantic Ocean. There's also another pretty interesting detail that we can admire. Just behind these figures on the large pylon made of Maine granite, we can see inscriptions of the gentlemen, all the sailors that lost their lives during this explosion. There's also an inscribed quote that reads, "Valiant seamen who perished on the Maine by fate unwarned, in death unafraid." And it really helps to capture the spirit of, again, all of these gentlemen that lost their lives here, looking along the pylon, you can find many different inscriptions of all the people that served on the USS Maine. Now, here's another interesting thing we can note. You might see that the Maine Monument's a little bit difficult to get up to because of these gates surrounding it. You might be wondering, why do there happen to be gates surrounding the Maine Monument often? These gates are actually put up by NYPD, and these come, sorry, lost my video for a second there. They're actually put up by NYPD, and they're typically put up in preparation for events that might cause protest or activism. We do see this area being regularly used for various types of activism events. And what we can actually see here is from a protest that would occur. What we can see here is a protest that was actually occurring just a few years ago, and unfortunately some vandalism occurring to the Maine Monument. I know these photos tend to kind of strike a heartstring with a lot of people, but we do see these events occurring largely in protest because of things like the loss of life and the loss of human rights. So we do see many of the protests kind of being warranted. Of course, damage does occur to features in these situations, but we do see the Central Park Conservancy being the organization that helps to clean these up. Of course, power washing and regularly cleaning the Maine Monument, because beyond damage from potential protests, there's of course a lot of different natural type of pollution from all of the constant automobile traffic and also all of the pigeon excrement that might get on the statue. And of course, we do see this being a regular thing. While we do see protests still occurring today, this has historically always been done, especially in areas like Columbus Circle. What we can see here is a poster coming from April 15th, 1967, accessed from the Museum of the City of New York, which shows an anti-war protest held over here at Columbus Circle. And as we may know, we do see a lot of activism occurring throughout Central Park, both in the larger meadows like Sheep Meadow, and even some of the smaller sections and areas like over here near Columbus Circle and the Maine Monument. As we look today, of course, the Maine Monument is shining bright and beautiful. And what we can look and see up top is some of the beautiful bronze iron, nobody actually knows for sure, type of metal. It's thought to be bronze that it was cast with up here on the top, that is then gilded with 24 karat gold. And what we can see here is a beautiful addition that actually comes directly from the Maine. Now, one of the Maine's masts was actually raised out of the water for years after it was exploded. It wasn't lifted and brought back up until about 1912 to actually investigate the sinking of the Maine and to recover parts of the ship. Parts of those recovered pieces of the ship would actually be used to cast the sculpture we see up top, which is Columbia triumphant, riding a seashell chariot being led by 3 hippocampi, a beautiful piece that helps to represent victory. And as we look around, we can see a beautiful shining sculpture, one that regularly gets cared for again by the Conservancy, as this piece over the decades would be regilded with 24 karat gold to keep it crispy and shining and bright. But as we look around, there's a lot of details beyond the, of course, bright gold piece up top that don't get as noticed. We can see in the back over here are a few plaques that surround the Maine Monument. And moving a little bit closer to the west side, we can see a plaque that's actually a little bit more special than some of the others. The plaque that we can notice over here was created by an artist, Thomas Keck. We can see a zoomed in photo here, but I'll bring up a photo of a different plaque of the same style. Thomas Keck created a series of these in memoriam plaques for the USS Maine Monument from recovered metals from the Maine gunship. So we can actually see these plaques existing beyond just here in Central Park, but also scattered throughout the United States. Like an example of one here from a park in Chicago, Maine Memorial in Veterans Park, Chicago, featuring one of the very same plaques that you can see on northwestern corner of the Maine Monument here in Central Park. But of course, as we look back in time, we can see the Maine Monument since 1913 has been a really amazing fixture here in the southwestern section of Central Park. And looking over these older photos, we can see how while maybe the Maine Monument and Columbus statue have largely remained the same, the landscape around it has largely changed, as we see extensions to the base of the Columbus Circle statue. And we also see, of course, the loss of those trolley tracks. One thing I do find interesting, though, is how the trolley tracks are still kind of retained here. in these circular patterns that surround the Columbus Circle statue. But of course, a beautiful piece that helps to welcome people here in Central Park. And this has always served as one of the most amazing and used and popular welcome areas in Central Park's history. As we come to the end of our walk here today, celebrating the USS Maine, which again, unfortunately exploded on this day in 1898, we've seen how Central Park has been the hub for many memorials for people that have unfortunately lost their lives. And as we come here, we can also talk about some of the other incredible events that have celebrated life and various things in Central Park on tours like our activism tour, a brand new offering for this month, which does have 2 more dates still available. Tomorrow, February 16th at 11 a.m., as well as Sunday, February 19th at 11 a.m. So be on the lookout for activism and a bunch of the other special tours that we're going to be offering in the next few weeks. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. If you do check the links in the chat, you will find some of the information regarding activism, as well as the Maine Monument, if you want to learn a little bit more about it. We want to thank you for joining us and supporting Central Park, helping to keep monuments like the Maine Monument looking shiny and bright, and all of the park's beautiful 843 acres clean and green. Thanks, everybody. We're going to keep this open for a little bit longer in case there is anybody that has any questions needing to be answered, or giving a few opportunities to catch those links in case you want to sign up for tours like activism. But from all of us here at the Central Park Conservancy, thank you for joining us. Stay safe, be well, and we'll see you soon. Bye, everybody.